Friday Night Racing
on Off the Ball.
Brought to you by Horse Racing Ireland. Love every racing moment. Visit hri.ie.
And you're very welcome along to this week's episode of Friday Night Racing. It's Ger and Johnny with you at 3 o'clock every Friday afternoon. And then, of course, from 8, you can hear us again on Off the Ball on News Talk. We stream at 3 across our social channels, so youtube.com. You can get us on Facebook and Twitter as well. The best place to get us is YouTube. It's the easiest and most navigable one. You can also leave a comment with us either on the live show or again later on that evening. Now, Friday Night Racing is brought to you by Horse Racing Ireland. Love every racing moment. Visit hri.ie or you can follow at HRI Racing on Twitter, and the hashtag is every racing moment. Johnny, how are you?
I'm good.
What's going on?
Big weekend on the Gaelic football front. Looking forward to it. Yeah,
it's been a good time to be a Galway person.
It has. I was just saying that to you. Yeah, like the Armagh game was like one of the most enjoyable football games ever, and even the Limerick game in terms of just like the being at a hurling game that close and that quality is. I can't describe how good that experience is as a sporting event. It's amazing, and like. Hurling's at a level now that is just like off the charts. Like if you brought any foreigner to that game last Sunday, they would be amazed, like gobsmacked. Of course, like Galway lost, but like you kind of came away thinking next year could be good fun for King Henry.
That's what keeps you coming back, isn't it?
Yeah, because it's interesting in Munster because some of the teams like we had. The Rock on during the week, Jeremy O'Sullivan on OTB AM, and it's like Cork have no guarantees whatsoever to get out of Munster next year, whereas Galway you think there's that like upward curve or whatever, but Munster is a different kettle of fish, and that's why hurling is kind of so mad at the moment.
Yeah, that's one of the issues that we want to talk about, is like giving people bang for their buck and enjoyment. I'm delighted to say Brian Kavanagh is with us. Brian, good afternoon to you. How are you getting on?
Hi Ger, hi Johnny.
How's it going? Last time you were here with us, you would have been still the chief executive of HRI, I think. You got your feet under the desk firmly at the Curragh. How's it going for you?
Oh, it's great, Ger. The Curragh's a great place and different type of job, but really enjoying it. We're stuck in the middle of the season now, and it's great. So yeah, lots of opportunity, lots of things to work on, but really loving it.
What are the bits that you found most different from your old role?
A few things. Smaller team, more involved as a result of that. Maybe closer to the coalface in terms of the action and in terms of getting things done. And very much just operating a business here, in charge of all aspects of it. So I love dealing with people, and you get that in spades here in a role like the Curragh.
I mean, look, there would have been no better qualification for knowing what was going on at the Curragh than being the chief executive of HRI. But was there bits of it that actually surprised you when you did get in and kind of get in under the engine?
Yeah, and I worked here at the Curragh before, but I sort of took the year, this season, to really get onto the bonnet and understand how the business worked, how the team here operated, and take it as a learning year. And you never stop learning in this business. So even though, as you say, you come from a job like the one in HRI, there's still lots of new things here, and maybe getting to understand more the nuts and bolts of the way things operate. So that was great. And as I said, there's a more practical element to this role, than perhaps my previous role, where a lot of diplomacy, a lot of politics, a lot of strategy and stuff like that. Whereas here, you're kind of challenged to go out and do it rather than put the plans in place,
Yeah, and I think in fairness, like a lot of people will be familiar, there were difficulties around the reopening of the Curragh after all the work was done. It would have been easy enough for you to go, I know exactly what the issues are and I'm going to go away, and it's not my job to go and fix them. But literally you stepped forward and went, I could fix this. I do know what the problems are, and I'm going to roll up my sleeves and try and take them on.
That was the attraction to me, Ger, to be honest with you. As I said, Curragh's a place that's dear to my heart. I worked here before, and as you say, I was involved in the redevelopment. So was anxious to, when you're involved in the birth, you want to then see the child grow up and try and help it that way. So that's the attraction of the position, to be honest.
How did you get the job, Brian? It was like Derek McGrath was there, and then obviously we had Pat Keoghan as an interim CEO, I guess, kind of, for a short period. And how did you get involved in it then? Why was it, I suppose, something that appealed to you in terms of post HRI?
Well, I suppose just being practical on it, Johnny. I had come to the end of my term in HRI and the end of my contract, and wasn't going to go forward. I took a look at as myself and said, look, I don't want to retire. I don't want to move into a different sector. Racing is what I love, and racing is what I understand. And to be frank, I don't want to go abroad. So, this opportunity came up. I live, 5 minutes from the Curragh. As I said, I've got a bit of a graph for the place from when I worked here before. So I felt there was unfinished business here, and there is unfinished business. So I decided to put my name in the hat, and thankfully got the role.
It's interesting you wanted to stay in racing.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine working in anything other than racing. I've done it I've done it now for 33 years or whatever, but I couldn't imagine not working in racing.
So the Curragh, it was interesting there for the derby, because you almost have to apologise to say you're having a good day at the Curragh, and I mean that in the nice possible way, because I think it's gotten so much bad publicity since the fact that it was for a long time. It obviously needed to be redeveloped. It was very dilapidated to bring any overseas guest, but then it was beset with problems obviously during the redevelopment, and it's a lot of people that maybe used to go to the Curragh, particularly Derby Day during the Budweiser sponsored era, and they obviously don't go anymore. But it's you're taking over an underachieving football team that has kind of fallen on hard times, maybe the Liverpool team of the 80s, but you're taking over when post Graham Souness. Does that make sense?
You're going to say Leeds United now, aren't you?
Yeah, you're taking over post Bielsa actually. Yeah, although not sure about is Pat Keogh Bielsa, but Brian is a big Leeds fan. But do you know what I mean? It's this is our premier flat racetrack, and there was so much money spent on it, but it was beset with problems, and it's not straightforward to say, well, we spend 90 million or whatever it is on this, so people will come, because it doesn't work like that.
No, completely agree with you there. And I mean, look, the Curragh, the money spent on the Curragh was money that was built up over decades, really. That the Curragh had not been developed at all, really, for 30 years, and a bit like Croke Park or Aviva Stadium, you can't do it bit by bit. It has to be all duck or no dinner. So there was always going to be a big bang development like that when the funding was in place, and we got great support to do that. And the way I put it with people is, it happened in Ascot, it happened in Longchamp as well. Whenever we go racing, wherever we go, whatever racetrack you go to, we all have our places. We all have our place we watch racing. We all have our place we get a bit of grub or a drink or whatever. And we all have our routes that we go around the racecourse. What you do when you demolish a racecourse and completely rebuild it is you demolish everyone's place. You demolish everyone's route. You demolish everyone's base during a race day. So, people come to the racetrack, and bear in mind that we had a sort of disrupted opening season followed by 2 years of COVID. So really people are coming now, and, to a large extent, only getting used to where they can go or where they want to go, and what facilities are there. So there's a bit of a learning curve there, and a bit of an education on our part with people. But, we're very keen to get feedback, good, bad or indifferent, on how we can, make the day enjoyable for racegoers, offer the best possible experience. Pat Keogh did a huge amount of work. And the team who built the place, Derek and his team, did a great piece of work in terms of building the facility. Pat came in and stabilised it and made some changes in terms of bars and restaurants and facilities, and I've come in to follow that along. So it was, and we got good feedback generally from the Derby, and I see it as a base to build on. That's the way we will be approaching it, rather than any massive achievement.
Yeah, and I think you're right there, because it's far too early to say, well, the Derby went well. I thought I enjoyed it, but I think I texted you that night and I said, the Curragh has to build on this, because I felt there was a sort of a foundation there. And I guess for me, at the Derby, it was a lot of people don't go racing anymore, but when you do go racing, the racing takes a very small percentage of the day. You're spending a lot of the time chatting to people, and it was very friendly. It was I spent much of the day just talking to people, and I think that's what the Curragh needs to get back. It's it's a friendly place where you meet people, have a good time, married with the fact that it is actually a modern facility now, unlike pretty much it's different to other racetracks in that it's uber modern.
Yeah, it's going to be there for a long time. So yeah, the facility is good, but you're right. What defines the enjoyment of the day, I think, and the same for any sport, is the atmosphere, isn't it? That there's a bit of crack, there's a bit of atmosphere, there's a good social aspect, and you're seeing wonderful racing out on the racetrack.
And what was your experience there as a local? What did the Curragh become? Because I just felt that for some reason, and it didn't happen with Punchestown, it didn't necessarily happen with Naas or whatever, the Curragh just became somewhere that the locals didn't as much go to anymore.
I don't know if like Punchestown is a festival, and it's kind of it's also a national hunt, and so therefore it has that, it's of the people. And that was a fairly easy, straightforward thing.
So the flat might not necessarily be of the people because
it hadn't traditionally been, right? You've definitely got to work to get everybody to come in, but like we would have gone racing the Curragh semi regularly. So like I moved away from Athy in 1995, so I wasn't going up and down the way I would have been previous to that. So I don't know what happened in the 90s and the 90s, but it seemed like it was spectacularly successful for a long period of time. Like it's still world renowned as a flat track.
Oh, totally. Like the racetrack's amazing. But that doesn't necessarily mean people, like Irish people, Brian, are strange because like they're more likely to go to Laytown than they are to necessarily go to the Guineas. So it's not like amazing horses do it for them, and it's a tricky thing. I don't know, is it the dominance of like Aidan O'Brien and Coolmore that have made people feel that it's a bit stale? I don't know what you think.
I don't think it's that, Ger and our Johnny, and the stats this year would belie that point. We've had 10 race meetings here at the Curragh, and we've had 36 different winning trainers. It's been really noticeable this year on the Curragh and on the flat in general how competitive the racing is and how much the spoils are going around. You know, more so you could argue than in National Hunt. Side of things, you know, so the competitiveness of the racing is there, and the variety of different faces who are winning races. You know, we've had a welcome return this year from English trainers, you know, coming back competing and winning races, and I think that's important from an international point of view. You know, I think the trick is to look at the modern day Ger Gilroys who are living in Athy and how we can persuade them to come to the races, and that's all down to you know the creature comforts here on the track, the quality of the racing out on the track, and the enjoyment, and we're open to feedback on that. We've just completed a survey of 600 people who attended here on Derby Day to get, you know, feedback on their experiences. I think that's right. I mean, like, there's no doubt as well, you know, sport has been consumed in a different way now. You know, in addition to the people who are here at a race meeting, you know, we had very strong RTE figures. We had 1 million people, just short of 1 million people watching on ITV, and a huge number of people streaming the racing on their phones. So, you know, the model is changing, but, you know, at the core of it, there has to be a good race day experience for your big days, you know?
I agree with you, because I sort of alluded to this with you during the week about League of Ireland coverage. I'm not that fussed about the TV anymore. I think like people are on their phones. It's like the people watching racing on their phones compared to TV is like off the charts and no comparison. So it's like, but you want to maintain, because people spend so much time on their phones now. You get on the bus, you wait for a train, you wait for a plane, everyone's on their phone. It's like you're not living here. Whereas if you actually go to the races, you do have that nice feeling of meeting people, and something, you know, unusual might happen, somebody you didn't see before. And I guess that's what the Curragh needs to do, make it something that you enjoy, that is like from the past but actually is kind of modern and makes people want to go. Because I completely agree with you, a lot of people don't go racing anymore because it's easy to watch it on their phone at the couch.
I think that's a key point, Johnny. Like I often say, they're called race meetings for a reason. I think one of the enjoyable things, and this is kind of I won't say uniquely Irish, but it's certainly more noticeable at Irish race meetings than other meetings internationally. You know, that they're a social type of event. You know, it's not just a case of people going, you know, watching the racing and you know, going home. It's who you meet, where you might go to afterwards. All those sort of aspects, and I think that's you know, all the good memories you have of good race meetings are about, you know, what you saw on the track, but also who you met at the races that day, what sort of fun you had, and I think that's an area we'll focus on going forward. You know, and that's going to be built brick by brick. It's not an immediate wave the magic wand.
The thing about building it brick by brick is now you have the facilities to encourage people to come along. Like, it's long been a stick to beat various Irish sports places that you know, you go there, it's not going to be a good experience. The toilets aren't clean, there's queues, whatever. But you guys have got that sorted, and like I do think that there's probably a stereotypical Irish overreaction when something isn't perfect on day one, that it's the worst thing that's ever happened that we've ever seen, when actually you had to wait a little bit longer. That got fixed. And all of a sudden, it's easy for us to forget that short period of time when things weren't great. And I do think if you...
No, I think, look, and I think people are entitled to expect the basics to be right, and that is a question. But certainly you talk to the people in Ascot, you talk to the people in Longchamp, who will be the two most similar developments, and they had broadly similar experiences, with their opening. As I said earlier, Pat did a lot of good work. There was a problem with the roof, which was fixed during his tenure, and that's gone now. People don't speak about that anymore. But certainly, what's good from our point of view is and we got a lot of which was very encouraging to me around Derby time. A lot of international visitors coming to race in Ireland, coming to the Derby, and now you kind of before you'd be sort of embarrassed, showing them around the place. They've got this image in their heads of Ireland, the home of the horse, and famous for its breeding and its racing and its great trainers and jockeys, and then they come to the Curragh and they say, "Is this it?" sort of thing. Now, at least you've got a place that bears comparison with some of our international counterparts, and it was deliberately built that way that it would cater for a crowd of the nature we had on Derby Day, with the scope then to expand it in the future with temporary facilities.
I think as well that this sort of attitude towards the Curragh was kind of it would grate with me a little bit, because, like, be true to your history, the Curragh has been home to horses for far, far longer, than you would imagine. Going back practically, I'd say, millennia, horses have gathered on the Curragh. And even for me, the little statue of Lester Piggott was a beautifully, just recently passed, was a beautiful reminder of that recent past, and even going back into the sort of the 70s when Lester would ride, in 60s or whatever. But the Curragh is such, it's an ancient, spiritual, almost mystical place in terms of horse racing, and we need to be true to that.
Yeah, not just horse racing. I mean, the Curragh itself, as a landscape or as an area, is unique in Ireland. It is mystical. That's the right word. I say it's Kildare's Cliffs of Moher. No other county has it, and I know the county council and the Department of Defence are having a look at the whole Curragh Plains and its future management. And racing is only one element of that. But I mean, there's unbelievable history around the Curragh in terms of its military history. There was, there's sites of great battles in the 1798 Rising. You've got Braveheart Hill, where the battle scenes in Braveheart were filmed. It's obviously a unique sheep grazing area. People from outside our area still don't get used to the fact that there's sheep roaming around the whole place, and its flora and fauna are quite unique. So there's a really good story to be told about the Curragh. We want racing to be part of that on a broader story. But from a racing point of view, you're right. It's the track is we're blessed with it, really. It's natural terrain. It's a bit like a St Andrews or a Ballybunion or something in golf. It's not something that a crowd of contractors came in with tractors and diggers and built. It's been that way for hundreds of years, and there is something great about the fact that Westover won the Derby there, racing over the exact same piece of turf that Santa Claus did in 1964, and Nijinsky did in 1970. It's a smashing track, and it's one to be very proud of. Well,
that's interesting that you bring that up, because that was one of the storylines in the aftermath of it. There was a suggestion, I think, from Alan Sweeten, just that maybe the Derby might look at, or the Curragh might look at shortening the Derby distance as a matter of interest, right? If say common wisdom was that was the right course of action, how would that be decided on? Who are the custodians of that decision? It will
be jointly decided between ourselves and Horse Racing Ireland. Really, it's quite a technical subject. It's a bit like deciding to change a 5-day cricket test to a 4-day cricket test or something like that. It's a fundamental change. The derbies in Britain, France, and Ireland had historically always been run over a mile and a half. And about 15 years ago, France decided to change the distance of their race to a mile and a quarter. So they reduced it by 2 furlongs. And that's to do with the type of horses that are being bred. There's a greater move in the breeding industry, and particularly in the sales industry, to breed for speed. So they're breeding horses that are effective over shorter distances. and they have a lot of appeal at sales. But when you look at the stallions that are standing at stud, still the sort of blue chip frontline sires are the Lake Galileos, the See the Stars, the Frankels. They're the top horses, and they're siring horses over middle distances. So it's a very complex argument, Ger. But just to answer your question, if the I would say from my role in the Curragh here, ultimately we run our race program here to test the best in the breed over a variety of distances. So it's like the Olympics. You have your 100 metres, your 200, your 400, your 800, your 1500, whatever. And we have Group 1 races over each of those distances. They're championship races. The idea being that each generation's horses, the best will prove themselves to be the best, and then they will go on to stud. And it's a natural selection that improves over time. So, unless there was a groundswell coming from the breeding industry to say, look, we want to change the distance of the Derby, I don't believe it's for the Curragh racecourse, its board or its management to be sort of arrogant is probably a strong word, but to think it's up to us to say what distance the Derby should be run over. But it would be a fundamental decision, like saying, okay, we're going to run the 1500 metres over 1400 metres in future. So it's a big change.
Can you see the pros to it, Brian?
Say again, Johnny?
Can you see potential pros to it?
I can and I can't. I mean, I think there's the short-term fix element to it as well. If you look at the French Derby change, people say, okay, it's produced some good winners over the last.
It's produced some average ones as well,
number of years. Yeah, but if you dig into it, very, very few French Derby winners have gone on now to win the Arc, which used to be the big route for horses over a mile and a half. They're both races over a mile and a half. So you saw the French Derby winner now, Vadeni, who won 3 weeks ago. He came and ran back over 10 furlongs in Sandown last week and won the Carl Eclipse Stakes against older horses. Again, a feeling that that's more commercially beneficial to him, having to be winning over 10 furlongs as a breeding prospect or a stallion prospect. I'm not sure that's the reason why you should have a distance change of a race, if you know what I mean. And the point I think that Alan would make in his article is that one of the beauties of the Irish Derby years ago was that it was the finale, it was the playoff between the best in the French Derby and the best in the Epsom Derby came, and they sorted it out at the Curragh who was the best mile and a half horse. Now the France have changed their race to a mile and a quarter. The French horses come over here less and less.
The problem is the English don't as well. I think it's like the last English trained winner of the Derby is 2004 maybe. I know Westover came over, but I'm not blaming anyone for this. The Curragh is a fantastic place to test your racehorse. The prize money's not an issue. There's no problem here. I just don't necessarily know what it does to change things over a mile and a half. And I do think like Aidan O'Brien's dominance in the division is definitely going to, if not waver a bit because of the loss of the Galileo influence. But it was just so much that like Westover came over, but like he romped home in the Derby. He was third at Epsom. So it's like, I don't know what we do to get Desert Crown over. He's not even running the Clips. He's going to King George. I don't know. There are lots of races open to these horses.
Yeah, no, look, and we can look at now. Well, Hurricane Lane won it last year as well. So the Westover was a second consecutive English winner. But you make a fair point that the English competition probably has been afraid to come over the last 10 or 15 years because the Irish horses, particularly from Ballydoyle, have been so strong. A lot of that down to the influence of Galileo as a very successful sire over middle distances. But it's certainly a debate worth having, and you'd always keep an open mind to these things. But personal view is that it's a bit like selling a piece of land. Once you sell it, it's sold forever. That's
a fair point. I don't think you can't say, we changed the Derby to 10 furlongs and then in 2024 we go back. You can't. I completely agree, and I don't want to mess with history as well, and I think there is a lot of prestige there, and I think the stuff in the breeding industry is kind of fluff. Like if a stallion starts doing well at stud, it doesn't matter what distance he won over, people are just cotton on to him and it's fashion. But I definitely think it was an interesting argument because like Brendan Duke Jr. was saying, you could have a triple crown of Guineas Derby and Irish Derby over the mile and a half, the mile and two, which I think is fascinating. But I do think like what you're kind of alluding to here, I think the shape of the Irish Derby will change a little bit because of the lack of the Galileo influence so much in Ireland going forward. In my view, anyway.
No, I think you're dead right, and there's a generation of younger trainers coming through now who are competitive at that level. So time will do that. I mean, I remember 20 years ago there was a debate about the Ascot Gold Cup, which is run over 2.5 miles, and they called it an anachronism. They said it was out of place having races for horses on the flat over those distances. It's now probably the feature of the week in Ascot because so things go in sort of trends and swings and roundabouts. So it's I think there are other issues to address around the Derby meeting and the Derby the Derby weekend before we start tackling the distance of the race itself.
Just one other thing, and I spoke to you about this before, and you kind of mooted that there could potentially be even a park and ride system. Like, the one thing that I think the Curragh is desperately badly missing, it's on the railway, it's literally on the train line, it always was. It's on the train from Limerick, Cork, Dublin and Galway, obviously primarily Dublin, but you could have this amazing Derby experience where, like, let's be honest, people would like to have a drink. They're not going to drink drive, so they have to sort out they can get a bus or whatever, but it's not the same. So I think you mentioned a figure like typical Ireland, was well, it's literally just put a station that was already there 20 years ago. I think the figure was 2 million at the time. That's probably about 27 million now with inflation in Ireland. But is it possible at all for this to happen?
Oh, I think it is, and I mean we've a railway station 300 yards from the racetrack. A lot of the race courses around the country are built are close to railway stations because that's the way the horses were transported to it. That station closed in the 1990s. And we run shuttle buses from Kildare to Newbridge. But to the point I was making earlier about the Curragh as an amenity, which people want to use, you don't want people driving to come and use and see the Curragh. So, the scope for railway station to be reopened and to be revisited is very strong. It's high on our agenda. To see how we can do that. It opens up a huge amount of options for us on race day if you're able to, as you say, get the station, get the train to the races and walk 300 yards to the enclosures. So we're definitely keen to explore that as much as possible. There is a station there. Obviously it needs to be brought up to standard to comply with health and safety and all those sort of issues. But
I think it'd be amazing. I think it'd be such a great day out. It'd be good in terms of our fight against climate change because people get on the train. You don't have to drive to the track.
Yeah,
and you know what I mean. Like it's
you're dead right. It's more than a pipe dream from our point of view. But as I said, if out of this review of the Curragh Plains, a new way of operating the Curragh itself comes through, which is based on visitors and people coming to experience the beautiful landscape. You don't want them driving if you can avoid it,
Yeah, and that all makes sense. We feel like as a country we're getting better at this joined up thinking where you kind of get loads of local amenities together and the people who run them give their views and then there's a shared vision for the future and there's a bit of buy-in, I hope. I mean,
very noticeable to me, Chair, having been here 20 years ago and you come back this time, how much more coordinated the various authorities are, whether it's tourism, whether it's county councils, whether it's Department of Defence who own the place. There's a much more structured approach to it and a together approach to things than I had experienced before.
Like John B. Keane said, Galway Race was a state of mind, but the Curragh is a lot more than a racetrack, and even from a racing perspective, that's where so many trainers are based. That's where so many people meet every day of the week. I've said, if racing could do a drive to survive and meet, Kevin Prendergast turned 90 last week. He had 18 holes of golf the day before, according to the Racing Post. I think you meet characters like that. You meet Frank Oakes, who basically rides out. He's one horse at home, 80 years of age. You meet the young up and coming lads who will ride their first winner, and you have so much history. And it's it's a part of life for so many people, the Curragh, and it's it could be even something quite special beyond just being a racetrack, in my view anyway.
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, in many ways that's a bigger interaction with the local community for us than the racetrack is the training centre. We have 1,000 horses trained here every morning. That goes on 365 days a year. There's a lot of people drawing an employment out of it. There's a lot of people contributing into the local economy from it. We get a lot of trainers, based around the Curragh, whose horses step out into the gallops each morning. And then we've other visiting trainers who come up, a couple of times a week.
It's part of the folklore as well, Brian. It's it worked up the old Vic, or I met such a one. Geez, who's that horse that was working beside me? This is going back to the old way of chat before everyone was on WhatsApp.
Totally. I mean, one of my first memories of the Curragh would be the excitement if you were getting the train down to Cork or down to the south of the country from Dublin. When you're going through the Curragh, will you see the horses and the gallops? Will you time it to coincide with it? And it was this sort of completely unknown image to me from coming from Dublin, that you'd look out the window and you'd see strings of 20, 30 horses walking around the place.
It's funny that when you're on the train, everyone looks out the window when they go past the Curragh and they see the horses, and like it is the most photographic place in the morning when the sun is coming up and you see the horses and the steam coming out of their nostrils, and it's like I think in terms of like flat Ireland, like that isn't like your Cliffs of Moher or your Ballybunion or whatever. Like the Curragh can be spectacular.
Yeah, no, you couldn't have put it better, Johnny. We'll have to get you on the PR team.
I'm available for work.
There you go.
I think I've just done 30 minutes there. But like I hope this is not coming across PR. I think the Curragh has fallen on hard times, and I do think it needs something, and I think it needs people to enjoy going back there. But as a lot of people don't go racing anymore because they literally it's going to be a challenge. Like British race, like Sandown Eclipse was down. Like I think it was down heavily in numbers this year. It's not straightforward to get people racing, and the Curragh is no different there. But I have to say, like I hadn't been racing in the social aspect in the Curragh in years, and I felt there was something there at Derby. There was like I actually really enjoyed that. I have very happy memories of like meeting people, but you have to kick on from there.
Yeah, no, we've the Oaks next weekend, and then we've 4 consecutive Saturdays in August, and the Champions weekend with Leopardstown early in September. There's great quality racing, and we now offer good facilities, good atmosphere, and a chance for people to enjoy it. So we intend to kick on from there.
Well, listen, we wish you the very best of luck with it, Brian. You're very good to join us this afternoon to talk to us about it. Last question, like what in terms of you talked about the lobbying and the politics of the HRI gig. I guess being free of that is something that must be very enjoyable.
I mean, I enjoyed it at the time, Chair, and you have a job to do. But it's nice to have a new challenge too. It's and I suppose staying in racing, staying in the same industry, you keep parts of your previous role. But I've been very sort of conscious to move on, take on the new challenge, and I think there's nothing worse than someone looking over someone's shoulder saying, "Oh, geez, I wouldn't have done that, or I wouldn't have done this." There's a great team in HRI, and they're well able to bring things on to the next level. But yeah, it's as I said earlier, some of the stuff you're involved with now is a bit more cold-faced than perhaps the previous role.
Brian Kavanagh, Chief Executive of the Curragh Racecourse, thanks a million for joining us on Friday Night Racing. Cheers.
Friday
the ball.
brought to you by Horse Racing Ireland. Love every racing moment. Visit hri.ie.
All right, this is Friday Night Racing. It's Gilroy and Johnny Ward with you. The big racing story during the week was that whatever row had happened, Frankie Dettori's back.
Yeah, he's back. I still think John Gosling could have maybe carried himself better after Stradivarius, like kind of effectively publicly sort of calling Frankie out. Frankie's given so much to racing. I think he could have handled it better, but they seem to be best friends again. So I think he's box office for racing and still is.
Well, winning cures everything, so back in the winners' enclosure, everything's grand again.
Yeah, like he did. I don't know what somebody said on this show. Like you can't necessarily be the best jockey at that age if you're riding sparingly. And that's kind of counterintuitive because I guess you have to look after your body. Spoke to Ronan Finn during the week, whereas like you and TJ Reid at 34 years of age, Ronan Finn scores his first goal in Europe. He was brilliant for Shamrock Rovers, playing right wing back. TJ Reid at 34 almost like looked as good as ever last Saturday, I thought. And I was like, how do you... And Ronan Finn was like, it's recovery and managing my recovery. As a jockey... I know Leicester came back late, but I don't know, maybe if you're very sparing in your rides, and I think that's what Gosling was alluding to, it's like you're either full-time jockey or you're not. And Frankie's, they all seem to be happy again now, which is good for racing. But yeah, interesting.
Well, he's not going to go on forever. That's the thing. And so you need to make the hay from the PR perspective while the sun is shining.
It's an interesting analogy there, yeah.
They've done pretty well with that, in fairness.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think the whole spat has been good for race as well. Like Frankie had a horror show at Royal Ascot. Like he'd one winner that I would have won on. Everything else went totally P-tong for him, leaving the blanket on, leaving the blindfold on a horse too late in a Group 1. Stradivarius was a mess. There were other rides like that just didn't go well for him, and I'm sure he had a lot of soul searching. He probably needed something from John Gosling that wasn't calling him out on national TV, if you ask me. And I'll always say this, like I find Frankie, I wish I knew him better, because like my experience of him is that he's a completely different person when he's in front of camera than when he's not. Like he's complex, but I think he could have been looked after better with Gosling in that regard.
Yeah, he didn't seem to bear any grudges about it though.
Not publicly anyway, but maybe Frankie.
Again,
Frankie is keeping that to himself.
He can write his 9th book.
It was funny at Bellewstown last year. Like, talk about flies around shit. Everyone wanted to swarm around Frankie.
It's like Tiger Woods at a dare.
Yeah. Although, God, I mean, like Tiger Woods compared to Frankie, like racing is very, very niche. The Tiger Woods thing, but I can't get golf. I just find it such a bizarre.
Okay, you got blown off track there. Go back to Frankie.
Frankie, like, oh my God, at Bellewstown, like, I could understand why, as a person, I wouldn't want to be Frankie Dettori. Like, he didn't have a moment's peace that day at the racetrack, and that's not easy.
He does seem to thrive on that, though. Like,
I'm not sure he does. I'm really not. Like,
tears of a clown.
Exactly. That's and I'm totally. I mean, being a psychiatrist here or whatever.
We like the 40 minutes we had him on the show, the 25 minutes, however long it was. Like, he seemed to be happy to embrace aspects of that, because that's the bit that makes it, like, it's like all sports people, we come to see these people who are like different from us do things that we can't do, right? And part of that is that we're willing to pay money to go and see them because of their showmanship.
Totally.
And part of that showmanship is like coming alive in front of a crowd. And maybe I don't know. It is
that was a Friday we recorded that, right?
Pop psychology, yeah.
Yeah, I think Bellewstown might have been the following Tuesday, so like 4 or 5 days later, and I was doing something for Racing TV, which entailed doing interviews with jockeys that had actually just loads of Barney Curley stories. And just before we were interviewing Frankie, I said, Frankie, I was actually the guy who we did a piece on the radio on Friday on Off the Ball. He literally couldn't have had less interest. He had no interest. And I was just like, I don't know, it left me, this isn't an ego thing. I was just like, he didn't even feign interest. So it's just like, and then the cameras rolled and he was Frankie Dettori again. Then the cameras were off and he kind of skulked away. So I think there's a complexity with Frankie.
I'm sure there is. Just to open the kimono here, you're exactly the same off air. Johnny's not like this at all. Won't answer our calls, doesn't answer our texts. Gets somebody to make him his coffee. You obviously learned quite a lot that day.
Yeah, I think my problem is that unlike this coffee, I don't have any filter on or off air.
What's the racing like this week?
July Cup tomorrow. It's an interesting point. We kind of referenced it there. Like, Aidan O'Brien doesn't have calls for these top class races at the moment, so he's Catamosto running in the July Cup was a 25-1 chance. Couple of Irish horses. You might remember Michael O'Callaghan when he was in studio with his prior to his trip to get booted and suited for Royal Ascot, was tipping up Twilight Jet to run well at Royal Ascot. He ran middle enough. Well, he's returning to England, 25-1. Romantic Proposal runs as well for Edward Lynham. Nice card at Navan tomorrow, and then we've 2 meetings if you're not in Croker, which I presume Brian Kavanagh will be on Sunday. Sligo and Ferryhouse.
Right.
So busy weekend, and looking forward to the sport and the football and so on and so forth. What happens in the rugby tomorrow? Tyr's call.
Ireland get beaten again.
By much?
I think there's a possibility, unless there's a sending off for New Zealand, which there could have been, should have been last week. That would change things, I mean, but then the referee is like a big.
But it's a Northern Hemisphere referee, wasn't it?
Last week it was, but it's a South African referee who, was referee the time that Robbie Henshaw got pretty much decapitated by the All Blacks. After we beat them in New Zealand, they came back and played a game in Eviva, and 2 of our players were like torpedoed in the head. And I was like, on you go, lads, come on. Oh, I love that black jersey. So we'll see.
It's a hell of a weekend. It's a hell of a weekend.
Enjoy your racing. Friday Night Racing Off the Ball is brought to you by Horse Racing Ireland. Love every racing moment. Visit hri.ie. We'll see you next week.
Friday Night Racing.
On Off the Ball.
Brought to you by Horse Racing Ireland. Love every racing moment. Visit hri.ie.